Welcome back. Well done if you've lasted, if you've seen the full review, or if you've just gone to specific shoes and you've come back for more. In this part of the Ultimate Vibram review, I'm going to talk about the best shoe, in my opinion, for the best use. So i.e., is it every day, is it rehab, is it transitioning, is it this, that and the other. Hopefully this will be really useful to you in trying to make a decision as which ones to buy, because as we've discussed, they're not cheap, and if you've only got one to buy, you want to make sure you're getting the best one. All the advice I'm giving you is as a punter. I buy these, this is my own money that's invested in these. I wear them because I think they're fantastic, and everything that I'm telling you is my opinion based on my experiences over the last 3.5 years of wearing them. Right, so we're going to start with general everyday use. So which Vibram Five Fingers are going to be good for everyday use? I'm not talking the gym, I'm talking walking around, I'm talking wearing when you're at work, I'm talking wearing when you're on holiday, and yeah, just shopping, all the usual things you might do. For me, I think you can narrow it down to really one of 4. So not really that narrow, but I'll still give you my countdown as to how I would go. For everyday use, if you're on a budget, then you're going to want to be either Pakila, which are good, you can double them over into running as well. So they're a good everyday shoe, you can use them for sport, but they're great to walk around in, they're comfortable, they're light. They will keep you relatively warm as it starts to get cold, but not in freezing cold weather. They have a good support underneath, and they're about, I think about 80, 90 pounds in the UK. So they're a good shoe. And the KSO, good old classic KSO. I think the KSO you can transition in, you can wear around, you can walk around in, and I think you can't go wrong with it. I think it's about £80. If you don't know what you're going to use it for, you can buy that or the Bakila, and that will do you really well. What I use every day are my Komodos, which are a fantastic all-round shoe because you can hike in them, you can run in them, you can train in them, you can walk in them, you can work in them, you can do everything in them. So for me, the Komodo is a fantastic shoe, tends to go well with a lot more clothing as well, because people get fashion conscious. I find these go really well with combats, not so well with jeans, but you know, with combats these will look good, or with any kind of jogging bottom, they look good. And also Spiridons. Spiridons, a great all-round shoe. I, at the moment, shift really between the Komodos and the Spiridons. Really comfy, worn with socks, warm and comfortable. Great for walking around in, great support on the bottom, really good, as we discussed before, really good traction underneath. So they would be my 4 for general everyday use. If you've got the cash, Spiridon or Komodo. If you need to spend less, KSO or Bakila. So that's your best everyday use. For transitioning, so everyone who decides to start wearing these when they've worn shoes all their life are going to need to transition. I'm sorry, you can be the best athlete in the world, you're going to need to transition. Most people will have built up weakness in their foot, will have stiffness in their calves, will get aching, will get some kind of postural correction in their spine. If they're learning to forefoot strike because they've never run forefoot striking, it's going to take time. And if you, like many people, decide to go and run a 10k, the first time you wear them, you will probably get some soreness in your calves, possibly injure your foot, and you're going to blame the shoe. It's not the shoe, it's you not transitioning properly. So I will say this now, and I say this to all my clients. If you are competitive, you need to be thinking about when to transition. Because if you're an elite athlete, it may even come to the point where you never transition, because it will affect your times initially. If you're an amateur or moderate athlete, and moderate to me is up to anything like semi-pro, you will probably lose some time initially whilst you're transitioning. However, you may gain time afterwards. And that's just from my experience. I train, in my opinion, better now. I run better, but it took me a year to get to that point through transitioning, correcting posture and so on. So what I'm saying is don't jump at blaming the shoe if you don't spend the time to correct your posture and transition your foot so your foot becomes strong enough to run properly and train properly in a Vibram. If you are then getting injured wearing them and you've done all the transitioning, then yes, maybe we can look at the shoe as a problem. In my personal opinion, in my clinical opinion, I don't think that's the case. I think most people are silly. That's not attacking people, that's a lack of knowledge that's out there, and that's why I'm doing this review. You can go back and see my reasons for going barefoot, and that's an old video I did. I will redo that one because I think there's not more I can say now. But yeah, it's transitioning is key. Transitioning is everything. If I have clients who I train who, when I say to them this may take you 6 months to a year to transition, if they say, oh, can I not just start wearing them now? I don't want to do it slowly, I need to keep running and all this. I say to them, well, don't bother. Because I don't want to be responsible for telling a client that, yes, it's okay to train hard, to run at the same intensity, to not learn to forefoot strike properly and get injured. So I'm not going to do it. Also, as I say, my older clients who are sort of 50 plus, we have to look at their history, we have to look at their posture, we have to look at whether it's wise for them to change. In some cases, people wear them just in the gym. So they wear them just when they're training, and if they're training light and not particularly aggressive or plyometric with their training, I don't see a problem. So as a practitioner, we have to be sensible. As a client, you have to be sensible. And personally, you have to take responsibility for transitioning. Again, there's more information out there on transitioning. I believe Vibram have just brought out their own information on transitioning. So look into it before you start wearing. And then you know exactly what you're doing when you go barefooting. And by barefooting, I mean wearing 5 fingers. However, with all that said, as I say, I highly recommend it if you are prepared to spend time wearing them. For in the gym. Now in the gym, I tend to like to go for a lighter shoe. Maybe that's because I've transitioned now. I don't particularly reach for my Komodos, although they're good for all round. They're too bulky for me. I think I'd be looking more at my Bakilas, which I train in all the time. Fantastic for running if you're going to do some running or bike. They're good for Swiss ball work, so if you're doing any training on the Swiss ball, very good for that. You can still squat and lunge and push and pull and do all your primal patterns with no problem at all with Bakilas. I also like my KSOs. I won't tend to run as much in the KSOs because I did when I transitioned because that's all I had, but I think I'd rather run in the Bakilas. However, they're great for squatting, they're great for all your standard work in the gym, so you can get away with those, and they will give you grip on the cables. I also love my ELXs. Absolutely minimal, fantastic for your squatting, for your cable work, for your running. And if you look at my primal patterns warm up, you'll see I was running in these on the treadmill. If you're running in these, you got to make sure you forefoot strike. You got to make sure you've learned and you've transitioned, you've progressed into forefoot striking. With none of these shoes should you be going on heel striking like you would in a normal shoe, a shod running. That's not ideal, and you will get injured, and that's not the shoe, that's you not correcting your running. But a brilliant shoe for all-round gym use. Really light, you hardly know it's on. Love it. Good if you're a boxer as well. Right, next one. Best for rehab. Now, this is an interesting one. If you've had back problems, in January one of my clients came in and I was really nice to them. They'd passed on a norovirus type virus to me. So through having some tummy problems, that virus actually went to one of my glute muscles, to my glute medius, and actually when I made a movement, I actually tore the attachment of the glute, which it was only a very subtle movement within the house. It was actually coming up from a squat position, and I can squat heavy, so you should not be tearing muscle then. But when you have a virus that attacks it, what can you do? So I was rehabbing from that, and what I found in the early stages was actually if I was wearing my KSOs, which I was at the time, I got more issues in my back than if I was wearing my Komodos. And I couldn't quite figure it out because I was like, well, surely they're both barefoot, it shouldn't be a difference. But what I noticed was walking on concrete, because there's very little sole on the bottom of the KSO, I got a lot of shock compared to the Komodo. Now, compared to generally walking, it wasn't much shock at all, but it was enough for me to feel a twinge around my glute and around my lower back. So what I did was I stopped wearing the KSOs and I started wearing the Komodos. And what I believe is happening, and this is again only a suggestion, nothing scientific, because you've got more sole and more grip, I'm actually quite unstable on my heel. So what I think it was doing was challenging my proprioception and making my stabilizer muscles work around my spine. Now obviously if you're rehabbing a back injury, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to get those stabilizer muscles firing. So I ditched my KSOs whilst I was recovering, whilst I was training. First, when I went back into the gym, I was wearing these. And so I think these are a great shoe for rehab. Without having been able to test it, I would imagine the Spiridons are probably the same. But the the Komodos, I would, if someone said to me, what should I wear when I'm rehabbing my back or muscle tear or anything, I would say Komodos, just from my own personal experience. However, the Bakilas would work as well. I don't think they're as good as the Komodos for that, but you can with those. So again, this is what I was saying when we went back to the all-rounders and the everyday use. If you're investing in a Bakila, you're going to have that option anyway. But be aware, if you're only ever walking in these, you may find you have to go back to a shoe just for the first few weeks of rehab. I'm not really suggesting that. It's just you may have to if you feel that you're easier in a shoe. Problem with the shoe is most of them have got about an inch under your foot, so you're actually going to be very unstable. So for most of my clients, I'd say just stay in a Bakila. So yeah, they're going to be the two I'd suggest for rehab: Bakila or Komodo. Komodo being the best choice for that. Right, in the summer, if it's hot, when it's hot, I think you've got 3 choices. And I'm talking hot, so I'm talking 30 degrees centigrade plus. You've got your Bakilas. You will sweat a bit in them, but they're light, they're easy to get on and off, and I think you could comfortably wear them. I hiked in these in 30 odd degrees and I was absolutely fine. So that's one you can do. I would go ELXs because they're super light. You don't really sweat too much in them, and they're just really good for when you're in the heat. And then if you actually want a little bit of air to be floating around, your classics. Now obviously if you're doing activity, classics aren't going to be the best because they're not the most stable on your foot, but they're great for just walking around if you're on the beach, if you want to slip a shoe on and off to get across hot sand or across some concrete or some rubble, then classics are great. For the cold, I think you're looking at Lontras. So as we discussed earlier, £150, they're not cheap. They're not massively barefoot because they're quite stiff, but they are still going to separate your toes. They have got a fleece lining, and they will be better in colder weather than most of the other Vibrams. So that's a decision, a call you have to make. Don't expect them to be the answer to all your prayers. They do improve your temperature, but they're not 100% everything I was expecting when I got them, because they're a bit too stiff and a bit too bulky. But I'm not upset about the money I spent. So good for rain and good for snow and good for cold weather. Also for colder weather, you got your Spiridons with socks in it. So you have to wear socks. But I think they're quite good for the cold as well. Better than most of the other makes, and I'm not quite sure why that is, but I just find that that's the case for me. What I will say is for rain, and although it's only recently that I've noticed that, I do think the Vibrids keep you out of the wet tarmac a little bit, so you're probably less likely to get water onto your toes, where they tend to get really wet with a lot of the other lines, and obviously you've got your flows as well. But the flows, you still feel like your toes are getting wet even though they're not, so that's your choice there. Finally, for the gym, because, oh no, we've done the gym, so I've just gone round again there. So yeah, that's when to use your different makes. At the end of the day, it's going to be whatever works for you. I'm sure there's some people who say what I get from a Komodo, they get from a KSO, or they get from a Spiridon. This is my comparison between all the ones, the different makes I've got. If you've only got one make, you can only comment on one make. And this is what I'm trying to say. A lot of the reviews out there will talk about one shoe and just tell you about that shoe and what it does. What I'm trying to do here is give you a selection of choices of shoe to buy, because the one thing I'm told by most people is, what one should I buy? Now you know what you need it for, what you want it for, and therefore hopefully narrowed it down to one or two choices. So yeah, look after yourselves, spread the word. Back to Primal Facebook page, YouTube channel, facebook.com/Back to Primal. YouTube is youtube.com/It's Your Health UK, or go to the Back to Primal channel. You can search it. I'm Alistair McGee, Osteopath, Chek exercise coach. Come and follow, spread the word, spread the videos, and hopefully we can build a primal community. Look after yourselves, be well, be barefoot, and enjoy your Vibram Five Fingers. Be primal.